Hello, good morning, and welcome to this session, Collaboration to Increase the Impact, Technical Challenges and Generated Value from European Federated Data-Driven Initiatives. So this session has been put together by the Federation of Big Data Innovation Hubs, the US for Data project, in collaboration with many other initiatives. So in this session, we will be talking about the role of federated data platforms as technology enablers, and covering aspects of policy, technology, platforms, and impact. So in full alignment with the track of EBDBF in relation to technology, platforms, and impact. As you know, there is synergy and overlaps in between data platforms and data spaces, and data platforms focus mostly on the technical and implementation aspects of data spaces, but there is a good connection. Many projects are developing these data platforms, and during this week and through the different sessions, you had the opportunity to join the deep dive sessions for many of these projects developing these platforms. But today we focus on challenges and opportunities on federating these initiatives. So this session that lasts 2 hours will be split in 3 blocks plus conclusions at the end. So the first block that will start just after my introduction is about the policy perspective of federated data platforms, and it will last around 25 minutes. Then this will be followed up by a session on technical and strategical challenges for these federated data platforms. It will be the longest part of 50 minutes. And we will have to finish before the conclusions, the part of impact of federated data platforms. I have the pleasure of moderating the first part. For the second part, the technical part, we will have Ricardo Simon from CEDAR in Ireland. For the impact part, we will have with us Richard Stevens from IDC. And finally, the coordinator of the US for Data project, Daniel Said from ITI in Valencia, will make the conclusions for us. So then we move to the first slot. By the way, as you are following this through Bit2Match, please feel free to post your questions, your comments in the chat, and we will make sure that we address them either on the chat directly, or we will pass these questions to the speakers whenever this is feasible. So we move into the first session, the session about the policy, and this session will show how technology efforts can be efficiently combined in a shared strategy around federated platforms. For this, I have the honor and the pleasure to have with me 2 people from the European Commission. So we have with us Federico Milani, who is the Deputy Head of Unit of the Data Innovation and Policy Unit, Unit G1 in DG Connect. And we have also Kimmo Rossi from the same unit, Head of Sector, and they are going to bring complementary perspectives from the policy side. And I will close the slot also with a perspective and ambition from the BDVA. So I give the floor now to Federico Milani. Federico, if you can come and give us your perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, and good morning to everybody. Well, what is the perspective of the Commission, and what the Commission is aiming to is really has been published together with the Data Strategy for Europe in 2020. What we've got is a number of initiatives there that covers both the legal framework in order to promote and to push the sharing of data, but also we've got a number of initiatives that really try to support through investments and through a number of initiatives the creation of data spaces. Everybody knows what the data space, and in a data space, of course, data platform play an important roles. What we've done is in fact devise in the Digital Europe program a number of initiatives that will tackle the creation of data spaces from 2 fronts. The creation of an infrastructure, a technical infrastructure that will support then the creation of data spaces to build upon which, and having a common infrastructure will assure a certain interoperability between the various sectorial data spaces. And we are going to have then a number of initiatives also from the other side, so the creation of a network of stakeholders interested on participating in a data space because they want to share data or because they want to use data that is made accessible. So these are combined and you will find them in the Digital Europe program. Everything in order to coordinate everything and to make sure that the various stakeholders will be able to talk together and collaborate together in order to achieve a higher impact. We are going also to fund coordination support actions, which we call the Data Space Support Center, which we will have a number of specific roles that I will talk together. So just briefly to mention what are the actions that we are doing. Let's start again from the technical infrastructure. We are going to launch a procurement for developing open source middleware solutions, which will be the building blocks upon which build the data space. This one will be implemented in cloud and edge environment, so that organizations that we want to participate, we want to use them, and we will want to participate in the data space will be able to use these building blocks common to all the data spaces. But then there will be also the part where we want to bring together the stakeholders in order to identify then the specific needs of each data space. And there you will see that in the first 2 years of the Digital Europe program, we are going to fund something like 15 different data spaces in different sectors. So it's quite a lot of numbers. Some of them we are going to start them through coordination support actions. Some other that we are more mature, we are already thinking, or we are already proposing a number of grants and projects really to start the core activities of these data spaces. And finally, as I mentioned before, we are going to have this data space support center that has got the task of, again, getting all these projects together, getting all the major stakeholders together in order to really have a place where the definition of the best architecture to be used, the best common building blocks to be used, also testing the common building blocks will be, if it is possible, and again, contribute to the development of this building blocks, which will be in open source, will be an essential part. In addition to that, they will also become what we call the operational arm, in a sort of sense, of the new expert group that we are going to launch, which is part of the Data Governance Act, which is the European Data Innovation Board, which will which has got the task that is being given by the Council and the European Parliament of providing guidelines for the creation of data spaces and for data sharing. And these are the three main aspects that the Data Space Support Center will do. In the meanwhile, we will continue also the research for developing new technologies for processing data, for sharing data, and for making new advances in data analytics. And for this one, I will give the word to Kim Morosi, that knows much better than me what we are doing there.
Thank you, Federico. You said it all. There is not much to complement. I say a few things, try to be short because we are so many. I would say that after so much talk about data-driven innovation, data-driven growth, data-driven everything, data-driven AI, I have noticed some fatigue, some sort of backlash, that in some member states, at least, there has been some resignation and disappointment that, okay, well, what can we actually concretely do? And some people have lost interest, and that's understandable. And it doesn't actually also help that we have had a little bit of a gap between the framework programs. So from going from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe and starting the Digital Europe program. However, now they are fully up and running, and the calls are open. The best remedy, in my view, to this fatigue is to start doing concrete things. And the people in this panel I'm addressing specifically because you are the movers, that you can make things happen in the areas that Federico was describing. So in addition to the data spaces, the preparatory action support center, and so on in the digital Europe program, do not forget that there is the new call of Horizon Europe program, which is open. We had an info day the day before yesterday, unfortunately coinciding with this wonderful conference. So it a little bit affected the participation rate of the info day, because I think people thought EBDVF is more interesting than a Commission info day on Horizon Europe. But don't worry, you will find the recordings of this Horizon Europe info day. Our session was in the beginning of day 3, so the 1st of December. And we're basically describing there what is left for the technology support actions for the data spaces. We already had a call earlier, which is now closed, for privacy preservation and for compliance technologies in general. So technologies that will in the future make it easier for the operators and data subjects and users to be in compliance with GDPR, with the Data Governance Act, and with the Future Data Act, and even the Artificial Intelligence Act, which is also coming up. Now we have on the plate data monetization. So it's a very exciting topic and a very important data market enabler. So the call is open for that topic, data trading, data monetization, and it will nicely complement the compliance technologies actions that we supported in the first call, which now closed already, and we will soon evaluate the submitted proposals. So very brief, that's all I needed to say. Let's move ahead. I thank you, the organizers. I thank the EU Hubs for Data project, which is my project. I'm monitoring it from the Commission side. So thank you very much for organizing that. Thank you, Anna, also for moderating this and inviting me. Bye.
Thank you very much, Kimmo, and thank you very much, Federico. I wanted to thank you before, but I was muted by mistake. So I also encourage people in the B2Match to ask now questions for Federico and Kimmo. And while you decide to do that, I would like to also put some ambitions on the table from the BDVA community, explaining a bit the link between the project and the community. So the EU Hubs for Data project, that is, in general, the Federation of Data-Driven Initiatives, it is, and it has been always a strategic priority, and now it's a project for BDV and the community. And it's something that we already highlighted years back in our strategic research and innovation agenda for many of the people who will be speaking today, having contributors to that. And I remember also years back, we started to talk about these I spaces, innovation spaces, innovation data spaces that we defined as trusted data incubators that were really mainly targeted to accelerate the take-up of data-driven innovation in commercial sector. So this was really, it's not something that we invented. It was inspired by existing initiatives in different member states. And all these platforms, because one of the characteristics was to have a platform, a data platform in the center. So they were hosting either closed or open data from business or from public service sources, and they were really supporting the ecosystem around with technical capabilities, application, skills, legal aspects, also in some cases, societal aspects, business aspects. And in BDVA, we created already years back these labeled I spaces as a way of recognize good practices. And for those of you who are following the event, you know, we had the ceremony for the new I spaces last Tuesday, partly from Ljubljana. And these ISPaces, they have been joining forces for many years, but now finally they are building this federation. So they are the ones really at the regional, local, bringing these data donors and this data kind of users, and now by federating resources, they are really providing or building this federation at the European level. Well, this is also for us important because also incubators that were part of the Horizon 2020 projects joined forces with this federation. And at the moment we have like 35 ISPaces in the community, and this is growing. Of course, the project is now, and you will hear a bit more. You have been hearing probably about the project overall in the EBDBF, but it's building through the project this very first solid federation. And there will be very interesting discussions in the panel after me about how this is happening technically and how we will connect with other initiatives also from the technical perspective, and how we'll connect with ongoing projects. And of course, creating very, very strong, solid connections with very key initiatives such as KAIX, International Data Spaces Association, FIWARE, EOSC, that again are not by chance that they are in the coming up panel. But our ambition from the community goes beyond the project. So the project will create the main foundations, but we need to keep, we think we need to keep investing. We need to really make this growing and creating value. And really, we want to make sure that future Horizon Europe programs and future work programs of the Digital Europe program also consider, the importance of this federation. We are ready, of course, I mean, this is a very experimental type of community, but it's very close to the real or the market data spaces. We are also having a lot of discussions with the standardization bodies to see how this federation can be really utilized in pre-standardization activities, for instance, for activities related to the upcoming AI Act, maybe for future activities related to the Data Act, because they see the federation as a very important source of not only access to a large community of data and AI companies, but also a way of experimenting also upcoming standards. And of course, we have also through the project find out that the federation can actually attract data communities that are a result of different projects and activities. They are spread out over Europe, and through the federation could connect to a core type of data initiative that can help them can keep the glue among themselves. So it has a strong community aspect as well. And we believe that because data flows is kind of course, we are a data community, so it's at the core of many things. We think this federation can also help to glue different instruments, for instance, in the Digital Europe program. At the moment that the ISPaces are also, in many cases, digital innovation hubs, and they are building this European kind of data space. And we think also we can create links in between data spaces and the testing and experimenting facilities for AI. And many of the startups part of the federation now are really developing very interesting and experimenting very interesting AI applications. And of course, we want this project to become a key instrument of the Data Spaces Business Alliance. So by saying this, today we focus on the current federation, but also on these technical and challenges, but also the opportunities and the way to create impact. And with this, I finalize my speech. As I'm also moderating, I'm looking at the time and the questions. I see there are no questions from the audience. Maybe if there are questions from the other colleagues in the panel, I'm also looking at the chat. So no questions. So with great pleasure, I give the floor to my colleague Ricardo Simon from CEDAR from Ireland, who is moderating the next session about the technical challenges. And thank you everyone for following this first segment of the session.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. Let me share first my presentation. 1 second. I hope you can see this. Can you see this, Anna?
Yes, we can see it. You just need to put it in present, and now it's perfect.
There it is.
Carry on. Thank you very much, Ricardo.
Okay, so hello, everyone. Welcome to this session, the particular one, the specific session within this session, which is on technical and strategical challenges for federated data platforms I'm Ricardo, as Anna was saying. I'm the Head of Innovation and Development in CIDAR, and CIDAR is Ireland's Data Innovation Hub in artificial intelligence. So we have a very interesting session, but first of all, I'm gonna tell you about the goal of the session, okay? So everyone is aligned. The focus here is in identifying and discussing the technical challenges and also the strategies when we are developing these huge European federated data platforms. In these federated platforms, we share content, we share data, infrastructure, software, and so on. So it is a tricky way when we have to put all of this together, connect them, kind of aggregate it and serve it to the user. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the scalability issues when we are developing these platforms and deploying them, trust issues, governance, interoperability, and sovereignty. I will ask the speakers to emphasize on best practices and particularly from the practical experiences that they have had when implementing federated platforms. And the use as well of obviously on architectures and standards that they have come across or even designed themselves. Okay, so we have a very, very interesting panel, high-level panel, a lot of CTOs here and directors, so it's going to be more technical, which I'm very happy about. First of all, we have Pierre Grondler. He's the CTO of Gaia-X Association. Then Juanjo Hierro, who is the CTO of Fileware. Then Sebastian Steinberg, the CTO of Idsa, the National Data Spaces Association. And then Tiziana Ferrari, who is the director of the Egi Foundation. And I'm there as well as the moderator of the panel. The way it's going to work is that we will all have 5 minutes presentations now. It's like a statement about this area, federated data platforms, associated to as well to the sort of work that we do in Gaia-X, Fileware, Idsa, and AEI. Particularly me, I'm going to cover EU Has for Data. Anna has introduced this project, but it is key for the European Commission now because it's a project that is trying, to aggregate the federation of the Data Innovation Hubs, create a new federation, and we are creating a platform. So I'm going to start with a 5 minutes presentation on that, and then we'll go with the speakers. So EU Has for Data. This project, it has been running for a year and a bit, actually, a year and 3 months. It's part of the Big Data Value Public Privacy Partnership. And the idea is that we create a new federation of data innovation hubs in big data and artificial intelligence. Why? Because at the moment, there's a lot of DIHs, right? And then the goal is just that they all collaborate in Europe, and we serve better all the SMEs and multinationals in Europe in a way that we have our synergies there in different countries, okay, and different expertise and different experiences. So the federation looks like that. We start with 21 partners. Most of them are data innovation hubs. For example, CIDAR, the one I work for in Ireland, is one of them. ITI is another one, which is the coordinator of the project. But also we have many others, as I said, and we have the participation of the BDVA with Anna there as a strategic partner to help with the federation and so on. For example, I can say that we have EGI as well, who's going to participate now with Tiziana, and International Data Spaces Association is also part of the federation. The idea is that over the course of the project, we are going to be expanding to more than 20 regions. And already, very recently, 9 new DIHs have joined the federation. So we are expanding. In terms of the platform that we are creating, because there are many activities, as Anna was saying, we are promoting experiments, we are promoting best practices, we are creating this federation, but we are focusing as well on creating this platform for all the DIHs to collaborate better with their services, and also to better serve the SMEs in Europe. So first of all, we have created this catalog. The idea behind this catalog is that we learn from what is happening at the regional level and local level with the data innovation hubs in AI and big data, what sort of services they are offering, and what the SMEs are actually demanding. So we've gone through a lot of brainstorming, practical sessions, interactions with SMEs as part of the experiments to actually define the sort of services that we as DIHs offer and the kind of commonalities in these services. Then we'll go back to the European level to create this federated catalog. the EU has for data catalog, which is going to feed back to regional level to actually create these synergies between services between the IHs in Europe and benefit SMEs at local level. So that's the main objective. For that, as I was saying, we have created a set of services, and it wasn't as easy as just start mapping all the services. We had to actually harmonize all of them. I'll show you now how this harmonization has happened, because it is key actually that we put in a structure, because we noticed that the SMEs were actually getting a little bit confused when accessing different services in the description and in the capabilities of the services. I have to say at this stage that services are different kind of services. So you have dataset services, as you have it there, as you can see. So we offer datasets there. DIHs offer datasets, SMEs offer datasets, and then what we offer is the metadata, but then everyone can actually use the datasets through connectors. I will explain that later. But we also offer training courses. That's another service. But there are way more services. As you can see here, this is the kind of taxonomy that we have created and harmonizing many DIHs in AI kind of offering. We have created different kind of main tier of the kind of tier 1 for services, which is to do with data and AI technologies, where you have like a breakdown in tier 2 of product development, prototype research and development, proof of concept, dataset access. So these are the datasets. Then more the sort of services with business development, ecosystem building. So you have, for example, communication and networking that we offer, brokerage, trend watching, data-driven business strategies, secondment, all of that. Then another category which is important is the infrastructure access, how we actually link them as services to provide to the end users. So we have broken down in big data platforms, computing and storage, and data management. And then finally is technology, consultancy, and training. And then we have skills development and training, but also specific courses that you can see there. This is very key that we created this breakdown and this kind of taxonomy to actually move forward and start linking all these services and make them interoperable. So in terms of the federated platform, we have obviously we follow the FAIR principles in the implementation as much as we can. The service definition in the catalog is key, as I was saying. We are kind of like mapping everything that we have seen provided as a service nowadays by the DIHs, but that doesn't mean that we cannot include more services categories, okay? And then every new DIH will have to conform to this structure. Now, the problem that we have is just we have the catalog, right? We have created services and all of that. We have to make it interoperable, portable, and all of that, and connect all of these services and combine them and aggregate them. So what we are actually designing now, it's more a semi-decentralized platform architecture. We are synchronizing, for example, my local offering as a DIH with the global offering in terms of services. So I can choose, what services I offer, to the kind of federated platform. I can remove them and I can update them if they are within, the kind of taxonomy and within the sort of standards that we have defined. This synchronization happens in a decentralized way, okay? And then we can talk about that later. But also the sort of access to these new services, right, or the federated services can happen through the main website or through the, a local point. So at the end of the day, the access could be through the website or the EU has for data, for SMEs, for all the DIHs, but then can happen at local time. But the synchronization behind all of that, we are trying to do it in a decentralized way. Again, interoperability and sovereignty and trust, we are trying to enforce there. And for that, we are actually following more and more the AIX architecture and its principles in just how to actually communicate services and engage and combine services as well. So one aspect which is important is the dataset sharing. In the catalog, we don't share datasets. We share the metadata. Okay, so people can actually browse and connect. But then what we do is we link, with connectors using the IDSA connectors. We link the data, okay, of the DIHs with whoever wants to use it. And what we're trying to do is obviously an implementation, which we're actually developing to improve the interoperability, the sovereignty, and trust there. At the moment, for example, each DIH is implementing their own connector, the Idsa connector, and we offer this description using, for example, JSON-LD in the website, in the catalog. So any SME can actually look for raw data sets, but then also connect with each of the particular DIHs or even other SMEs in the future that are offering the data. But still, there are many challenges, particularly about sovereignty and somehow trust. For that, we are using the DCAT vocabulary to actually synchronize metadata from data sets. So these are some of the aspects while we are building the platform that are quite interesting, and then we can discuss about them, because I think they are very much common when you develop these federated data platforms to everyone. So that concludes my presentation here. And now we have Pierre Grondler, okay, the CTO of GaiaX Association, who is going to prepare a 5-minute presentation. Then he will go Juanjo, Sebastian, and Tiziana. So I will introduce now Pierre. So whenever you want, Pierre, as well, you can start. Sharing. So Pierre.
Yes.
Pierre Grondler has been working for the last 12 years or more in the IT industry with a particular interest on operationalizing and scaling systems in the field of real-time communication and cloud services. Has an academic background in real-time embedded systems and applied mathematics in signal processing and machine learning. And he started as a research engineer in video compression before joining Skype and Microsoft. He then joined OVH Cloud as cloud solution architect, advising and helping key accounts with their IT resources, architecture, and consumption. He participated in the development of the first GaiaX prototypes, and now he is the CTO of GaiaX. And one thing that is very interesting is his favorite hobbies are software and hardware prototyping and reverse engineering systems. So very technical. So I hope he helps, reverse engineer the federated data platforms today. So over to you, Pierre, for your 5-minute presentation.
Thank you very much. So let's go and jump directly into the heart of the content. One slide, there is only 3 slides. GaiaX goals: promote European value and digital sovereignty. As some of the viewers here knows that I'm not a big fan of the word sovereignty, and I would prefer that it's more explicit to me that we self-determine our level of autonomy, which I believe is more correct when we talk about data and digital identities and other things, because sovereignty applies to state, to kingdoms, to maybe individuals, but not to static element. We want also in GaiaX to create bigger and richer data spaces by connecting interoperable ecosystem. So data spaces, that's the ability to connect data pod or to chain data usage. And ecosystem are a group of participants that exchange services. Could be data, network, compute, storage, single tenant, multi-tenant, connected, disconnected, managed, self-managed, or combination of everything. That's what ecosystems are about. And we have a lot of existing ecosystems. So the idea is to be able to connect them. And finally, technically speaking, with also one of the goals of the association is to enable this composition of services, this ability to change services from one organization across organization. And that's require interoperability. And there are several levels of interoperability, not only just the technical one. So to explain a bit more what we want to build for ecosystems, I will lean a lot on an existing specification on an existing paper from the NIST. So since we have 5 minutes, I will give that as an exercise for the viewers to go and read the chapter 1 and 2 of the NIST paper around cloud federation. Their main idea in those 2 first chapters, and the rest of the chapter kind of diverge a bit from GaiaX. So chapter 1 and 2 explain exactly what we build. Those ecosystems, you have 3 planes. The trust plane, where you have this notion of identity, the identity schema, the governance model. That's where you have your KYB, the know your business, sits in, know your customer. Then you have the management plane, where you decide what are the roles, what are the attributes, maybe the ontology of the data. And the final one, the usage plane, where the real exchange of services are happening. And again, services is not only about the data. So that picture is coming from the NIST 500-332 paper. You might say, well, if you use one paper that's existing, what is the value of GaiaX? Then we want to enable this service composition within those ecosystems and across them. And for that, we need to have interoperability. Technical interoperability, that's good, but that's the last step, the final step. Before that, you need to have interoperability of your identity schema. You need to have interoperability between your governance model, your licenses, everything that is needed for supporting your business, the provisioning, the scheduling, the orchestration. You need to be able to measure how portable or interoperable you are. By the way, we are hearing a lot of interoperability of data, and data is portable, it's not interoperable. Interoperability requires two elements to be analyzed together, to have interoperability between elements. To summarize with what we do in GAIA-X, we have those 3 planes, and then we have the ongoing work is to define the cursor where we put the cursor in the 2 overlapping arrows on the side. What is defined by GAIA-X and what is our main focus is to define the trust plane, how we define trust anchor, the governance, the voting mechanism, how to find each other. So in a fair world, because we also adopt the same principles, you have the F stands for find. If you cannot find other ecosystem, you will not be able to use them. And finally, because this is always required, what are the remediation and revocation system? If we don't have this interoperability of the trust plane between ecosystem, then ecosystem will not communicate with themselves, between themselves. And that's what we really focus on with GAIA-X. Then we move to the management plane, and we are defining things. What is the smallest amount of governance rule or rules that we need to set to have this interoperability of the managed plane? Basically, right now, we agree that we will enforce how you describe your vocabularies, how you describe your portability, what we could call second order logic rules. But the value of the description, and that's the first order rules, and that's defined by the federator. And then when you move to the usage plane, then it's really up to the users, to the federators, to be the expert in their domain and exchange services there. We can provide best practices. We will implement one decentralized ecosystem. But for all the existing ones and the one that will be created later, where they want to keep their services private or to have their own existing stack, because you have 3 elements that exist right now. The fact that you have data gravity, so data will stay where it is, and you cannot necessarily move it from one place to another. You have technology adoption, technology adherence or technology stickiness, that when people are used to something, they will not change. So that will be all for GAIA-X as a high-level view of where we are. And I will be happy to take this question of how technically we answer those challenges.
Thank you very much, Pierre. It's very clear we are not going to use sovereignty now anymore. We changed to the autonomy. Okay, I kind of agree on that. Okay, so now we go with Juanjo, so you can share your screen, Juanjo. So Juanjo Hierro is the Chief Technology Officer of the FIWARE Foundation and Chairman of the FIWARE Technical Steering Committee. He's also strongly involved in activities of the fast-growing Open and Agile Smart Cities initiative as one of the people that helped to found it. His leading role in several open source initiatives has allowed him to gain a deep understanding about the open source phenomena. It's important to remark that he has participated as invited speaker in workshops, congress, and events, and has authored several scientific papers. And he has also been invited as an expert to several workshops organized by the European Commission to define technical objectives of some European strategic programs. So over to you, Juanjo. You're muted, Juanjo. Juanjo, you're muted there.
Thank you, Ricardo. So, well, of course, we have a short time, so I will focus on what I think is a bit the challenges we have in the discussions, trying to define what would be the basis for data space in Europe. And I think the main strategic technical challenge is what is within the scope. This is what I have found is always in the topic for discussion, and I will elaborate a little bit about that. For historical reasons, I think there is no doubt how to address the challenges connected to sovereignty and trust in the exchange of participants in data space is within the scope, but sometimes it is more question what aspects needs to be defined in terms of ensuring data interoperability and how to create value around data and perform things like monetization of data. So I will focus on these two mostly in the presentation, even though I will cover the other one briefly. So why within scope we should tackle interoperability is because we rather believe if we really want data spaces to support the data economy, we have to enable certain fundamental principles, which are those that a data provider or a data app provider should be able to publish and offer their service, knowing that the consumers, which they may know not a priori, will know how to consume them. Similarly, data consumers that join as participant data spaces have to be able to discover such services and know how to consume them. And this requires really that all participants speak the same language. So fundamental aspect I think we have to define, and we are defining within Fireware when creating data spaces, is what could be that same language. And that means defining the sentence you construct. So what is the API for the data exchange? What is the vocabulary, the dictionary you use when you speak that are the data models? And what are the common mechanisms for identity and policy control? And think about the World Wide Web, which is probably one of those spaces which have driven innovation for so many years. Could we think about how it would be able to trigger such an innovation if only HTTP and SSL has been defined? We needed HTML. So definitely we need to provide a definition for interoperability. And that means defining APIs, models, and a solid identity and control policy framework. We think about the opportunity to create data spaces for exchange of digital twin data, and that could be the basis for discussion about how to address interoperability. The other question is about data value creation. Essentially, two challenges. First, same as in the content in the World Wide Web, we need to define what are the means for describing data resources and applications, and how to harvest and discover such data resources. And also, if we want to avoid that at the end of the day, data resources and app providers get locked in proprietary data apps stores, we need to define some means for describing offerings, for establishing how logs are created and what kind of logs are created when a given contract is established or when a given data resource or app is being used. And in this case, the message we would like to convey, don't reinvent the wheel, leverage standard open specifications that are out there, like the CAT AP or TM-Foreign APIs when we talk about supporting federable marketplace services. Of course, we need to leverage also aspects regarding distributed ledgers technologies. We need to find out how to connect with the European blockchain service infrastructure in the future, for instance. Regarding data sovereignty and trust, I will not focus that much here. From my point of view, it's about bringing together the different pieces and explain how they could be working together. Standards like OpenID Connect, verified credentials, still using a XHTML model supporting the different policy enforcement point connectors and so on. And last but not least, I wanted to finalize a little bit provocative, elaborating on what I believe are non-technical challenges, but sometimes even more hard to battle. And that is this attitude about this is out of the scope. I believe that really brings a risk we may fail to deliver what is needed. And the second very harmful attitude about not invented here, because that may mean we waste time reinventing the wheel. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanjo. I totally agree with the reinventing the wheel. Avoid reinventing the wheel because everything is kind of invented. It's just to rearrange those pieces there. The problem is how to rearrange them nicely. Okay, so thanks, Juanjo. And now we have Sebastian. So whenever you want, Sebastian, you can start sharing your screen. So Sebastian Steinberg worked for 9 years at the Fraunhofer Institute for Software and Systems Engineering in Dortmund as scientist in the context of cloud computing, big data, and IoT. Here he gathered experiences regarding digitalization in logistics and service industries. And since 2017, he's the lead architect and CTO of the International Data Spaces Association, Idsa. Here he's responsible for the technical development of the IDSA space, IDS, including IDS RAM and IDS certification. So over to you, Sebastian.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Thank you all for having me here in this great session. Really interesting talks. So I would like to, of course, explain a little bit about the strategy of the IDSA approach towards data spaces to building federated ecosystem that include trust. And then, of course, I will bring also some insights on the technical and practical challenges that we have. So maybe to start with the perspective of a state or a kingdom, like Pierre mentioned it. So data sovereignty is an important aspect here, a digital sovereignty, because you have to decide if you want to plug into a data space, into an ecosystem, into a federation or not. If you take this user perspective, I want to do an informed decision about trustworthiness of partners and the components that are used and the composition of a federation or an ecosystem. And I think here we all share the same idea that we want to have the self-determination here. So what is the IDSA strategy towards this? So we started a couple of years ago to create a reference architecture model to describe the idea of IDSA, how such federations work, and what is the outline, the blueprint for such data spaces. This is a foundation, and this is not a whole data space description. It is a small part of the puzzle, how you can exchange and share data while maintaining your data sovereignty, meaning you can put your usage conditions on top of the data, and you can decide which conditions have to be in place when sharing with someone you don't even know before. So this is a general idea. But then the second question, of course, comes immediately into place. How can you verify that you're compliant to this structure, to this reference architecture model? How can we ensure interoperability and compliance? Well, this is why IDSA maintains a certification scheme that explains how compliance could be assessed with the means of interoperability. So each component in such a data space can connect to each other component in the data space and can exchange data. It can exchange obligations and duties for the usage of the data. This is something that is really required to do this conformity and compliance assessment, and of course to bring it into the runtime. So I don't only need a paper that states you're compliant, you're interoperable, but we have to verify this during runtime. Because when someone approaches me and asks me, Sebastian, can you share this data set with me? Then I can ask, so how trustworthy are you? And then, of course, after that, the third question comes into place. How can we support with practical examples, with blueprints, with systems that can be used immediately? How can we support this? And therefore, we come up with this portfolio of building blocks, with open source building blocks that you can use to step into a data space. So a technical foundation to set up an IDS-based data space by reusing open source building blocks. And the whole story then afterwards is explained in the IDSA rulebook that explains the organizational outlines, which is very, very similar to what also Pierre already mentioned before. And if you're asking for practical examples, take a look at this open source landscape. Take a look at all the cool projects that are out there that are implementing IDS, or take a look at the use case radar on the IDSA website that shows you a lot of interesting and cool use cases that build data spaces practically. So what are the challenges? I'm completely with Juanjo that we have this design principles for data spaces with the 9 building blocks that really show us what are the technical challenges. What do you have to provide, implement, and make usable by everyone to build a data space? Interoperability, trust, and building the data value inside. These are the important things. But how can we implement this inside a federation? So we see that we have those essential services, or the federation service inside GaiaX, that provide identities, that provide trustworthy claims on the determination of trustworthiness of someone, that provide functionality for metadata discovery of services and data sets, mechanisms, decentralized, centralized mechanisms for clearinghouses, for example, for distributed auditing logging. Those things have to be provided by a federation to then set up data processing chains and enable data sharing and data exchange between participants. And so this is the structure of one federation, one data space that is set up where people agree to share data and to collaborate under certain conditions. And this is what IDS ensures, because we make at least a part of the rules for such data space instances, for such federations. And at the same time, we have to make sure that when I enter one data space, that I want to enter one federation, that I can step in another federation with ease. So we don't have to set high hurdles here, but we need one common standard, one common framework that enables also the roaming between these different federations, because no company is just a logistics company or just an automotive company or manufacturing companies. You're always into different data spaces. So we have to ensure interoperability on a certain level between the data space instances. And this can be done by standards. This can be done by open source components, and this can be done by all the work that we are doing together here to set up the common rules for data spaces. And then you can build your instance and your federation, your common rules that stick to your own federation. So with that, back to you. Looking forward to the discussion afterwards.
Great, thank you, Sebastian, for your presentation. We'll talk about trust later on, because that's the main aspect all the time. As you were saying, companies are like, how can I trust you? And I still see it as a big problem. So thank you very much, Sebastian. Okay. And now we have Tiziana. So Tiziana, you can go and share your screen. Tiziana is director of the EGI Foundation, as I was saying, and she is responsible for the EGI Federation as well, the European Distributed Infrastructure for Data-Intensive Scientific Computing, which comprises hundreds of research data centers across the globe and deliver bespoke solutions for data-intensive science. Her role as EGI Foundation Director is to provide the strategic leadership and drive the participants to achieve their goals by helping the EGI Federation setting its vision and strategies for scientific computing. Tiziana is a network engineer by training and holds a PhD in computer systems, networking and telecommunications from the University of Bologna in Italy. So over to you, Tiziana.
Ricardo, thanks for this nice introduction. And I have to say, I'm really honored to be in this panel. In this presentation, I will bring perhaps a different perspective on data spaces and federated systems. And what I'd like to present to you is the experience that the EGI community has been gathering in implementing a large-scale federated platform for research data sharing to support the scientific collaborations. So I hope that with this few slides, I will be able to show how some of the principles that have been illustrated by the previous panelists have been put into place to some extent to have a large-scale federated system working. So first, what is the EGI Federation? It's the flagship infrastructure for data-intensive scientific computing for Europe. And it's probably today the largest federation of research data centers existing in Europe and worldwide.
Sorry, Tiziana, one thing is just we don't see the slides in full screen, and they are not just.
Okay, let me try again. Can you see?
Yeah, now we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So I was talking about the EGI Federation as being one of the largest federated platform for scientific computing for scientific collaborations worldwide. And this is an initiative that started back in 2000 and investigated and demonstrated the viability of research data processing across the scientific collaborations in the world. It started with a very fundamental problem. How can we face the data deluge in research in some key research domains, such as physics, astronomy, astrophysics, while having researchers distributed in the world and the sources of research data also distributed in the world. The answer to this problem was to first build a hyperscale facility by pooling funding coming from different research funding agencies in the world. There was a business decision about investing nationally in larger scale computing facilities, making sure that the investments would happen in the country, but still enable global access to the data and the computing facilities to all researchers. And then to bring computing to the data, meaning acknowledging data would be too large to be distributed and exchanged. The only viable solution back in 2000 was to really bring computing where data resides. This inherently enables what has been named data sovereignty, which means giving researchers the full control of which peer researchers can access their data and share it for similar scientific challenges and purposes. Today, we have a federation which exceeds 1 million CPU cores, which federates research data in the volume of 1.3 exabytes of data, and serving more than 170 scientific collaborations worldwide. Who are the beneficiaries of this platform? Well, larger scale scientific collaborations globally, more than 77,000 users, and this infrastructure has been enabling some of the largest and most important discoveries in physics in the last decade. And I like to name the well-known discovery of the Higgs boson, which required the processing of hundreds of petabytes of data. And more recently, the discovery of gravitational waves 100 years after the publishing of the relativity theory by Albert Einstein. How was this possible? This is a slide which shows the technical architecture of the infrastructure. We have been essentially building a federation working at 3-level infrastructure, bringing together research clouds, public clouds, HTC and HPC data centers, having federating solutions which enable hybrid and different computer platforms and data storages to come together, a federated identity system, which has been mentioned by my previous panelist speakers, and federated data. So these were the 3 federation pillars that have been enabling this endeavor. On top of this, we have, let's say, scientific applications and data, which we could call, using the data space terminology, thematic spaces. And every scientific community can share data and applications across the data space, which is enabled thanks to this federation layer across hybrid infrastructures. What were the strategies and the challenges that we faced? And I hope we can discuss this more in detail in the coming part of the panel. Well, first, the strategy was to have a really low entry barrier for federation members. Federation means aligning policies and protocols and standards, which can be very costly for research data centers and in general for ICT operators. So the cost of harmonization has to be fit for purpose. A common security set of policies and a common trust and identity model is paramount in order to enable sharing of identities and federated identity providers that can be connected to a larger scale set of services and research data repositories. We also need a fit-for-purpose governance and a federated service management system, delegating operations of the data and full control of the related services to the operators, while having a very thin central coordination for the services which enable the federation. The challenges were many in the last 15 years of our operations. We find that sustainability and scalability of the middleware, which is being developed and adopted, is one of the paramount enablers and probably the most difficult initiative to sustain. Adopting open source projects, which also have a large workforce supporting this, is very important in order to be able to operate in the long term. Sometimes it means is giving up the idea of inventing your own standards in order not to introduce barriers. So we should be very careful about reinventing the wheel, as other panelists have already pointed out. Usability, scalability, and robustness of the software solutions are necessary in order to have real users using data. And this can be extremely challenging when we handle different types of data, different volumes, and the different localities to be integrated. So this is an extremely challenging area. It took us about 7 years to be able to demonstrate the federation and the data exchange at the level which was required by our scientists. And finally, and this is, I think, a forward-looking challenge, we have been able to enable exchange between researchers working in similar scientific collaborations, but exchanging data across the scientific domains is still an open challenge. So we still need, in the scientific domain, a clear governance model which allows research data exchange and also provides incentives to scientists to do that. This is where we are looking for collaborations with EU Hubs for Data, with GaiaX, with BDBA, so that the research domain can contribute their experience and also learn from the experience from business and public administration. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tiziana. Great presentation. Again, you know, I'm happy not to reinvent the wheel, because that's how I think as well, right? And we can delve into a little bit deeply the problems, you know, with scaling there, the sort of, you know, combination of HVCs and HTCs there. But what I'll do now is just I will ask all the panelists to share their camera, and we'll start with the questions, the panel. I can see there in the chat that people are actually already engaging, and some of you have already replied. So if you can do two things at the same time, that's great, you know. But anyway, let's go with some 4 main aspects that I have here. I think we should cover, and we don't have that much time. But anyway, I think it's key, and I don't know if the audience realizes who you are there, but it's just bring all of these kind of people there together in the right, you know, kind of, they are coming from the right associations and the right projects. It's a privilege there. So since everyone agrees that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, the first thing is just in terms of interoperability and portability, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's connectors, IDSA, you know, web services, microservices, standards, frameworks, policies, service descriptions and vocabulary. All of that is there, right? We're just putting these things together. So from your perspective, guys, where do you see these main challenges, the main technical challenges that we are having, the main one actually, to advance in terms of the interoperability and portability? And if you have any experience dealing with these major challenges in a practical level with a platform, that would be appreciated as well. So who wants to start there?
I can start.
Okay, Pierre, fantastic.
For me, the portability and the interoperability starts. I will speak on behalf of the association of GAIX one and what we focus on. Of course, there are different needs, but when we talk to the data users, and that was mentioned by someone else before, the first requirement was, do I know you? Do I know who you are? Do I know what you represent? And do you have access to the resource to ask? So the first interoperability that we need, and I've seen that in my experience also, that's the identity. Portability of the identity, that would be, for example, the ability to have your identity in one cloud provider and use the same one in another one. And are those two service providers trusting the identity of the other? That could be named also identity roaming. Once you have that, the second criteria, that will be the interoperability and compatibility of your contract, the terms and conditions. If you don't understand the terms and conditions of the other, you will not sign the contract and you will not enter in a commercial relation. So I know that there are plenty of other things that needs to be done, but from my point of view, since the question was what is the highest priority, that would be identity and the contract management or licensee negotiation.
That's very insightful, actually.
I may add on this. Sorry, but great answer, Pierre. I completely agree. And I think this is really one of the main challenges. And it's not the question is, do we have the right tools in place? I think we have, but it's a question of how to choose the right tools and to agree on the set of tools or a set of standards to really ensure that everyone is working with the same things. And it has to start with identities. I'm completely with you, Pierre, here, because this is the foundation for everything, that we need some certain agreements. We need this, used to call it soft data infrastructure. So not build new hardware data centers, but agree on some certain standards, that we all have a certain identification and we can easily add such claims like how trustworthy are you and so on and so forth easily to that, because this is the foundation to build up everything else that comes beyond. And of course, this has to be built inside tools. So we need a proper tooling in place, meaning open source software, closed source software, I don't care, but we need an offering for such data spaces that not everyone has to reinvent the wheel, build new source code, but just use the proper tooling and just plug it together.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I would like to say one thing, which is we have to be careful about this idea of prioritizing, because at the end of the day, data spaces will work if we cover all the fronts. And there was a question actually in the chat, a very interesting question, because someone was raising, Juanjo, you forgot URIs as one of the cornerstone elements in the World Wide Web, and actually it's true. And that was dealing with identity of pages and so on. But had the World Wide Web been successful only if URIs had been defined and a standard for URIs had been defined? No way, sorry. So we need to cover all the fronts. We need to cover how federated identity is solved. And here, I don't need to add anything to what you have just said. We need to cover these aspects about how offerings are described, how contracts are established, and how to monitor such contracts. And we have to cover the aspects about interoperability, how different participants will be able to speak each other and understand each other. Because otherwise, we will have things that will work, but not really capable for boosting the kind of innovation we want to boost.
Yeah.
I'd like to offer a comment on interoperability as well. There are some very horizontal components of the software stack, as pointed out by Pierre, that have to be truly homogeneous and endorsed by all federation members to be successful. However, in our experience, at a higher level in the stack, it's impossible to have universal interoperability. You will always find a combination of different industry standards, different de facto standards, and then the complexity of a data space is to essentially integrate those into a working system. So we actually speak more in EGI about interoperation rather than interoperability, which means having components, software components in the stack that work as translators and allow the user or the data space operator to integrate heterogeneous data, heterogeneous services, and to have these enablers as proxies, which connect different components and can speak different languages. This was for us paramount, for example, to work with the United States. It was impossible to impose a single standard across such a large base of providers. And at the data level, this is even more complex because the sectorial data uses domain-specific standards, and then universal standardization across data, at least in research, is unattainable. So again, there must be community reference blueprints to achieve interoperation in every domain, in every data space. This is our experience from the research world.
Yes, but I have to differ a bit because, I mean, having or thinking about a space where you have to translate peer-to-peer and have proxies for translation peer-to-peer because you want to support all the protocols of the world will not really lead us to the kind of innovation we have been able to boost with the World Wide Web. Imagine is someone may have decided when the World Wide Web was designed that you don't need to specify a concrete markup language. Someone could have decided that, and then things have changed totally. And HTML was not perfect, but since it was adopted, is why this dramatic change happened in all our lives. So, and here is where I want to bring something that might be relevant, and it's the connection between digital twins and data spaces. Because digital twin, we all know, is also a very important concept, and a concept around which creation of the standards may be worked. And if we come with the standards for how to exchange digital twin data, then we have a big step towards this interoperability, because perhaps we are not supporting all kind of data spaces, but if we reach the ability to have data spaces for exchange of digital twin data in a standard way, then we will have a lot of boost innovation.
Yeah, Juanjo. I think there's interesting kind of different positions here, right? And I think we have to agree on many of standards there to support everyone, but then still we have to have a defined architecture and a few standards there to have communication, right? And as you say, Juanjo, at some point, there will be some standards that will prevail, right? And they will be the good ones. But I think equally, Tiziana was saying, we have to support as many, standards as we can, right? To actually link, in the platforms, many different kind of verticals and standards in different areas. But it's very interesting, what they was said about the identity contract and trustworthy by Pierre and Sebastian. It is about that, I believe, and I think particularly GaiaX and IDSA are working on developing these kind of architecture standards around that. Correct, guys? Around this trust aspect and identity and contract. I'm going to go and ask you now about the sort of, I was touching with you has for data. We're actually developing this decentralized approach, right, with services. But it's not really decentralized. It's a little bit semi-decentralized, because we still believe there has to be some sort of entity, like a regulator or a broker there, for example, to regulate ethics issues when somebody posts a new service, okay? So what is your approach, guys? So what is your view there on the future? Every kind of new technology is moving to the peer-to-peer decentralized aspect, right? But what do you think about those elements, to regulate, those central points to regulate, the semi-decentralized aspect?
Well, if I may go first this time. So this is an important thing, and we have to, I think, distinguish between two aspects. The first thing is the worlds that we want to live in, and the world that we are currently living in. I see that for today, something that is completely decentralized is simply not possible because of completely different things. We have some issues with technical readiness levels, with industrial acceptance of technologies for decentralized approaches. That's one thing, and I'm pretty sure that we will solve that. Maybe not today, we will take over the weekend, and on Monday we are a little bit further, and it may take maybe a year or 2 or 5, I don't know. But this is just one aspect, but we have to deal also with other aspects, and I think you mentioned it pretty well. There are some legal aspects that have to be covered. So sometimes in such ecosystems and business ecosystems, you need to have some regulating entity that is defined by some lawsuits, and we cannot change it easily. So we have to accept it, and this goes into such a federation. It has to be adopted by such a federation. And there are sometimes agreements in such an ecosystem inside a federation. I mean, if a certain community establishes and they decide to set up something like a central role that covers some certain aspects, that could be technology aspects, it could be business aspects, it could also be ethical aspects. So we agree based on a code of conduct that we do nothing harmful with the data or whatever this shall mean. But this is a basic agreement. So I see that we have to push and to move from a technology point of view towards decentralization as far as possible, but this takes time because we are not always in an industrial practice here, but we have to consider at the same time the requirements that comes from the business side, from the legal side, and from the communities as well.
In terms of decentralization, on my side, I will split the topic in two. the infrastructure and the governance. Decentralizing the infrastructure, we know how to do that since years. That there is no question. Decentralize the governance, that's much more difficult. If we take, for example, the European blockchain infrastructure, there is blockchain in the name, but this is very centralized project. If you're not having the proof of authority for the European Union, you're not in. If you are not using a token to access the API, you're not in. So the decentralization in the name is just mirage. A good idea, but not really there in practice. And setting, and there is something that we must not forget. Users are already having data and sharing data. So saying that we need to enforce by regulation, it will not work. You have data gravity, as I said, you have digital stickiness. People will not change what they have if there is a very good reason for them to do so. An example that proves that, you have the regulation from the financial market, DSP2 in Europe. You have one regulation, 5 non-interoperable implementation in Europe of the DSP2. And this is regulated by the European Union. And it's a perfect example that if you push too much for regulation, and there is not a benefit for the user because that's not matching what they need or what they are using right now, you will not get any adoption.
Yeah, agree. Okay, Juanjo, Tiziana, if you want to say something, you have 30 seconds. Unfortunately, I had so many other questions, but we're limited in time. I don't know if you want to say something very quickly on that, and then we wrap up.
Decentralization. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
In our experience, was particularly important in managing access, meaning decisions on who has access and how identities are accepted has to be delegated to the providers. And this is fundamental to ensure data sovereignty and full control to that. So this is quite fundamental in the design of a data space.
Okay.
Well, decentralization is key. So, but I think the advantage of being the last one is that most of it has been explained before, and yeah, there are certainly challenges around that. Also, how I would like to just add an additional one, which is how to be able to cope with the challenge of making the data pervasive and be able to access to that and do processing near to data, and how to distribute such data in an architecture where you need to combine the edge and the more traditional cloud and allow that data flows in a seamless manner.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. Happy to see that this decentralization aspect is not fully decentralized, semi-decentralized, as we all think. And now we don't have time, which is a real pity because this panel has been very interesting. We will need another 50 minutes or so. So with that, I want to thank all of you, okay, for this, for your participation. And I will pass on now to my colleague, Richard, who's going to lead the next session. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
We can hear you well, Richard.
Thank you. I had a bit of a trouble sharing my screen and turning on the video there. Okay, so really interesting session. Daniel, that was really kind of central also to what we're going to talk about. We're going to slightly change the topic, and we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of the federated data platforms and the work that EU Hubs for Data is doing there. And today with me, I have Denia Canalopoulou. She's an innovation specialist from the head DIH. I've got Miguel Vidal. He's CTO at Artebro Tech, And I've got Mauro Benenici. He's a principal motivator from a company, a startup as well. And we're going to hear a little bit about their experiences and what they think Federation can do for impact in areas like data sharing and the work we're doing in EU hubs for data. I'm Richard Stevens. I'm the Vice President at IDC for EU. We're a research, international research group, and we're focusing on impact. Today, what we're gonna look at is the impact that things that digital innovation hubs and the federation of them can have. So if we look at what we've done, we are we're federating the different DIHs across Europe, and we have a very clear mandate as far as impact is. We have set up over 100 KPIs, and we're measuring them to show the impact. And so there are things like access to data sharing, where we were expected to have somewhere around 50 data sets that we're sharing across the different DIHs, and we have 147. That's an example of the impact we're having. Or we had originally 10 DIHs. We are expected to move quickly to 12. We're already at 18 DIHs that's that are in our federation. That's another example of impact. Again, we're looking at the impact across how we're engaging SMEs, if people are happy with what we're doing, how we're actually training and allowing the community to get a better grips of the skills that are needed. We have, of course, like most of big initiatives, we have some KPIs, and we're measuring the impact of our communication and dissemination. We have some activity to talk about the regional impact of DIHs, and we're running a bunch of experiments. We have a number of KPIs to actually show how fast or how good the things are working in these experiments themselves. But the guy in the street, he's thinking, well, so what? How does that really impact what we're doing? That's what we're here to talk about today, is what kind of impact federation can have on our types of communities. So let me give you an example. You might be, for example, a small company, a small startup with some cool ideas on how to do precision agriculture based on some AI analysis of terrains and stuff. And you might have a plan to use something like the meteorological data put on top of terrain data to actually analyze the soil components in that, and actually do precision application of pesticides or something in the same field, changing your changing the level of pesticides you put on any given part of the field. Well, luckily you're there in Ireland, and luckily you've got someone like Daniel near there, and you find that CEDAR actually has a good AI center, and they belong to this DIH. And you go to them, and they help you build the algorithm to do that. And it kind of works, but it's actually pretty complex, because it's using meteorological data, it's using terrain data, it's using huge maps and data sets of Landsat data or something like that. Well, what happens? Daniel says, well, look, actually, we're part of a federation, and you can actually use the Europe's largest Landsat data coming from from RISE, which is another digital innovation hub in another country. Or maybe you can use the supercomputers at Chineka. They're also part of our federation. They're from a different DIH down in the south. And so we can actually take your application and run it with a really significant data set on some high performance computers. So we can actually prove your application and actually make it more viable. So the difference is the impact. If the single SME just went to Daniel, he could say it's a good idea. But being part of the federation, having all of the DIHs with the competencies and the data sets around Europe allows this small company to actually make an application that can be taken to the market. So one thing is a good idea, and another thing is actually to have some market probable impact. And it's not just for the SME; it's also for the DIHs. So the DIHs are also getting more and more people coming to them because they realize, wow, I'm here in Ireland and I have this great application. And I saw the fact that I could actually run this application maybe on some high performance compute that's down in Chineka in the Digital Innovation Hub in Italy. So the DIHs are getting larger and growing constituencies as well. So this is an example of the type of impact we're kind of expecting in the federation. Just one example. There can be a lot of different types of reasons to get together and federate. Of course, one is sharing data models. One is sharing data itself. So what I want to do is I want to talk to the people in this session and see what they think about the same thing. So the first, our first speaker is Miguel Vidal, and he's the CTO of Artebrotech, which is a company that's working in Industry 4.0, big data, and machine learning, AI, etc. He's an expert in data analysis and machine learning, but it's interesting, Miguel comes from a long background in experimental particle physics and worked for more than 12 years in CERN and also in Fermilab in my neck of the woods in Chicago. So Miguel, I'm going to give you the screen, and you can tell us a little bit more about what getting together with other groups, DIHs, other SMEs means for Artebrotech.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, give me a moment to share the screen. Okay, let's try to use that in full screen. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for this introduction. As Richard said, I'm Miguel Vidal, CTO at Artebrotech. And yeah, we heard before in the previous panel, as Tiziana introduced how data was treated in particle physics. I was part of this business for more than a decade, and his discovery both and these kind of things. And now with our small SME, kind of a startup, we're facing problems. We're coming from these big data projects. Now we are facing the real life problems with data in SME. So today I just want to share with you a use case, a really small one, in which in our company we decided to develop a software product. And yes, I want to share why we decided to do that, and it's related to data. And that's, I think it's a nice example of how standardized data from across Europe can lead to small companies to really jump and go for a product decision. And then a little bit as well on how and which are the problems we found. So at the very beginning, it was kind of very clear to go for this product, and then we really find a lot of problems related to how the data was distributing and how this data at the end was provided. So really quickly, because the startup in which I'm working and I partnered is very small. So we started in 2018, 17 actually, but for real in 2018 with 4 people. Now we are 11 people, and our leitmotif here is like, well, we do this kind of consultancy for other companies. We solve problems, and we are not a software company, so we're basically physicists, engineers, and this kind of things. And then we provide software to as a final product, but say we do work that is related to artificial intelligence and data analysis and these kind of things. So all of this is the problem, the real life problem that I want to talk today is one of a product that we have that we call Untitled Tender, and we are not a product focus oriented company. We do, as I said before, we solve problems. But once we analyze a problem, when we see that in the market that there's a solution that fits as a software, as a service, we develop it. So, and in this case, we were doing a project for a construction company in Spain, and the guys wanted to know the probability to win or not a public tender for a construction contract. So we analyzing the problem, we realized that there is a public data that is standardized across Europe, and then tons of data since 2012. And we decided to really go to the market with the software because most of the historically rest of the companies were trying to offer this public tenders information based on manual, so people actually scrapping here and reading and passing Excel sheets from one side to the other. So really quick, so why we did that? Because we found that there was a project that is called Tender Electronic Daily. That is the whole data related to tenders in Europe is centralized in this project. Since 2012, the Sun digitizes data. It became, at least in Spain, official or obligatory to really share the data in a digital form since 2018. And basically, when you, well, this is a huge project to really standardize this data. What means standardized data? There we can exploit tons of data from the whole information for a public tender. And to give an example, there's 2 things that are called, where the project is going to be executed. This is a NAT that is basically a code all across Europe, when you can just say, okay, this project is going to be in the Madrid area or in a Paris area, and so you have a specific code, and this everything is standardized. There's another one, that is CPV, that is basically what is about this contract. And to give you an example, 45 is related to construction, 72 is related to software, and you can go in a tree structure to things like a 7221291. That means, for example, services in software development related to compilation. So it goes really deep, and this code, it works here, it works here in Spain, it works in France, it works in Poland, it doesn't matter. So this is a huge work since years to really standardize this data. And then say, okay, fine, let's develop this thing. You can do analytics. We do AI in this product as well. We provide the clients with some price for the bid, related, doing some neural networks and treating probabilistically the data to really try to do a forecast of the price, because the public tenders is a bid in which every person that wants to go just bid for the contract. Now, this is the nice thing. There was not that nice thing. So in principle, this data was in sync, and you could have it in this Tender Electronic Daily. So you have this data from all the countries in Europe centralized in one place. As the user, we are the user of this data, and it's open data. Every day you have the historical data, and everyday data. Every day you have all the contracts in the whole Europe. So when you go there, actually, reality is not that cool. So only in Spain, we have to check the tender electronic daily in Europe, the platform centralizing in Spain, and then we have another 19 platforms coming from the regions. They put the data in public, and 7 of them, they are not syndicating the data. They are not doing the right translation of the data in a daily basis to the centralized platform in Spain, and neither to the tender electronic daily. Well, what that means is at the beginning of the project, we just attacking, say, the database from a centralized place, and was okay. But then you realize with a client, they don't want 99% of the data. They want 100% of the data, because otherwise your product is not valuable. Say if you are searching for contracts, you cannot miss a contract. This is not a product. This is not there's no way to go to the market with this software. So at the very beginning, it was a nice project, and it is still a nice project, but it was kind of simple from the point of view of the data. Right now, we're only for Spain, and we're doing this kind of data also in other countries. Only for Spain, we're attacking more than 8 sources of data. Some of them are open in a functional treatment way. Other of these sources we are doing web scraping. So this is an example of how this whole project during decades doing the standardization, having open data. It's a very cool thing. It becomes a product, but still the way in which data is provided to an SME, to the public, even to citizens, because this is open data, you don't even need a company. You can go and just check the information. And to really have the whole data set of information, you have to go around, at least in Spain, about 8 places and really check this thing. So to me, this is a nice example of how, such a project, we started with a really good reason and with a tons of work to really standardize. At the end, as a valuable information, it becomes half not fully operational because of the treatment of the data at the very end of the day. And yeah, that's it. I think I'll leave it here to really then discuss and
yeah, okay. We'll get a chance to come back and talk a little bit more about this in just a second in the group area. Thank you very much, Miguel. I'm going to move real quickly forward to Denia, and I hope I don't massacre your name too much. Kanalopoulou. No, Kanalopoulou.
Anelopoulou. But it's a nice effort.
Denia, let's just say Denia. Denia, I have a background very similar to my own, and she is an electronic computer engineer, but also has a Master of Science in economics, economics of telecommunications and networks. I'm just economics, but so you've actually been working for quite a long time as an electrical and telecommunications engineer in some pretty interesting places. So you've been at the European Space Agency, you've been at the Hellenic Electricity Distribution Center, you've been in the Hellenic Telecommunications Organization, and now you're in Demokritos. And so you're responsible for innovation in this DIH. How do you pronounce it? Ahead. Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what being in a DIH is, and what you think can happen in the area of federation, and if that's interesting to you, if that's important to you and your stakeholders.
Thank you, Richard, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for inviting me in this session. Well, as Richard mentioned, I'm trying to combine this background that I'm also a researcher and an engineer, and I'm trying to combine these two in something that is a really challenging landscape in order to provide innovation. So in order to bring research and cutting edge technologies to be adopted by organizations, by public administrations, and to boost the digital transformation and innovation and also for SMEs that want to not to reinvent the wheel, as I mentioned in the previous panel, but to use technologies that are available, to combine them and to provide something that does not exist out there. So a few things about AHEAD. AHEAD is a digital innovation hub that's operated by NCSR Demokritos. Demokritos is the largest public research center in Greece. It's located in Attica. Attica is the area where 50% of the national GDP is created. The main technological pillars of AHEAD is artificial intelligence, big data, and Internet of Things. AHEAD has ties with more than 100 industrial stakeholders, and is also supported by the companies that are hosted in Demokritos Technology Park, Letkipos, for incubation, and it's more than 40 companies. AHEAD is a member of the Big Data Value Association, among other associations, and recently has received a Gold Data Space label and joined the EU Hubs for Data project. We are really excited about that, not just because there are some achievements for our efforts, but also because of the impact that we can jointly bring. And on one hand, I have to mention that our ecosystem has top-notch expertise on these technologies, and we can drive new data services. But on the other hand, we are a public organization, and we are fundamentally supporting the society. And we are trying to ensure that the data-driven services are human-centric and ethical by design. And in order to give a view of how of a digital innovation hub that is operating as a data space, data spaces can enable data sharing for different stakeholders in the value chain, and thus they can transform the associated industries. One stakeholder is the data providers. Data providers joining data spaces can view new market opportunities and can also make a repositioning of their data by reusing their data for different reasons. Also, there are associated benefits for data processors. For example, the use of artificial intelligence can provide advanced analytics, and the value of processing as an enrichment integration of the existing data can change the scale of the services that a processor can see and offer. Also, there is, of course, benefits for the data consumers, as they can enrich their data by combining different providers and issuing new forms of data, by having support by the federation and including transparency, the transparency aspects and trust aspects in the data they are offered. But what I would like to focus on, and which is something that they will not be, probably was not so much discussed until now, is the benefits that there are for the society. As said, the data consumers can also be citizens, and the citizens cannot be offered data that were not available before. They can see value in the available products and services. For example, imagine a food supply chain where trucks and goods are equipped by a variety of sensors. Then a consumer can know the maintenance conditions of the food she buys. Also, data can be used for decision support and can such optimization of resources, for example, and this can lead to a green economy. For example, one example is that Richard mentioned with the pesticides in agriculture. Another example to follow the previous one with the logistics and for food supplies, that the logistic company can optimize the routes based on the data that receives from the sensors. But also this data can be enriched with data from weather sources, traffic sources, and this can then the company can optimize the routes, and this can lead to reduced emissions. And there is evidence that the supply chain impacts for more than 90% of the impacts on more than 90% of the natural resources. Another thing is that not only data, but the most important thing is that we can have actionable insights by the analytics on raw data, and this can offer new data services to the consumers and to the society, to citizens in general. Also, the federations have established the processes and components that can ensure that the data can be trusted and they are of quality and that they are reliable. And also a federation a certain sustainability by making sure that there is a redundancy of resources and data and there is a scalability. And also the thing that I mentioned before about the ethical and legal aspects, aspects like privacy, transparency, explainability, standardization are issues that the federation can contribute to and that the federations can guarantee for the society. And also what I would like to say is that the federations need to have an eye and an ear open to the society and that the society can dictate needs to the federations. And data spaces by principle respect European values and regulations. And that's something that is really important, and that these federations can put people and not only organizations in control of the data and the services that are data driven.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Neil. We'll come back to most of those topics in just a second as the rest of the group comes in and we can have a little roundtable on some of those discussions. But we're very happy to see your interest in EU hubs for data, and we'll come back to why you're what you think the most important parts of that are and what are the most impactful things about EU hubs for data or federations like data in just a minute. But in the meantime, I'd like to bring in our last panelist, Mauro Benici. So Mauro is a software developer. He's currently working for Knoka Minolta and in the digital transformation department. He's an agile software developer and Scrum Master. He's also very interestingly, he's the principal motivator of a small company, a small SME, You Are My Guide. And Mauro is going to tell us a little bit more about that and what it means to get involved in communities like this and work with federated data, and maybe tell us also a little bit about the situation of DIHs in the Rome area, if you have access to them, if you are working in this area. So Mauro,
hi, Richard. Yes, thank you for having me. And I just worked in the area of big data in 2008. And as you can imagine, it was different, the world at this time. And where we started now in Your My Guide, this startup that created a software called Ghostwriter AI. And this software was created just to analyze data that has become to be open sourced by public administration and companies. When we started, we see that there's a lot of data that are not public, or just are public if you ask them to be shared with you or with your company. At the beginning of the journey, so we have to sign a lot of contracts, a lot of NDA at the start of the beginning, and to write a lot of providers, just to have wrappers, and just to have some sort of checklist, just to know where this data will be available or not available, or where they can be used in the country when they were created, or where they will be shared with other countries, or when you can just have this data with an expiration date. What we looked with talking to a lot of public administration around Europe is that a lot of administrations start to share this data, but they do not, as is possible, to have common standards, for example. So a lot of them just start to share and just to create their standards. So, or just to put directly their export data on the cloud, on the public shared data. And then so what we did is just started to have a common of educational training
just to say that, okay, we can federate this data, or there's just burning new area and new services inside the European communities, to say that this data can be shared and can be managed in all one point. When the national services began to move from Italy and arrives, for example, to Spain and Netherlands, we reach a lot of problems by just legal problems, because we know now we have the GDPR, but countries can choose autonomously to have more restriction from data from their citizens. And this problem began a workflow just like a chain, because who produce the data is not the same companies that provide this data. It is not the same companies, for example, that share this data with other countries. And sometimes happens that some customers point to us that a field of data that we are using are old, or these data are not updated. But this is the common right data that was provided by the companies. So just to have an update of this data, we want to wait 3 or 4 companies and all the chain of approbation. Also, there is no idea when you have this data is not just updated or not, but it is legal or not to have this data. Because, for example, something changed, a regulation, internal regulation changed. So the impact also to have some federated is only one point when someone can update this data, all this data, so not this data, the metadata, the structured data, the legal data, and so on. And the impact for little startups is also to be able to demonstrate that data that we are using are not bought from the black market, as some scandals say appears in the years, and also there are valuable data, and or they are used. And also we can check with the customers and just customize the projects if they want to use this data or not. Or for some just mission or the vision of the companies of the ethical value that the company wants. This is the legal data that the customer provides, for example, all the regulation, all the acceptance, the agreement to use this data. But the company wants, I don't want to use, for example, these demographics data at all. So there is something that is clear, as is transparent, to say where these data are from, or the data are updated, and who can use this data. That today are for internal data created, or are biased this data, and just to avoid to have a monopoly of the data. So just to arrive to buy everything, this data, kind of data, only from one private companies, that it is just like the only trust of source. So this is another way that we have to avoid using these open possibilities to have shared impact data.
Okay. Let's come back all together now and discuss a little bit about this. So, Denia and Miguel, you're back on the stage with us. Mauro, thank you very much for that window and insight. And let's talk a little bit about the, we've seen over the last couple of days, you've been in some of the sessions, probably you've seen in the session before us, people are somehow or another getting together and sharing data and talking about how to make things interoperable, talking about digital innovation hubs, how to in particular, we're talking about this federation and what kind of impact it has. Now, I look at Denia and I think, yeah, it's probably going to have a big impact on her DIH. She probably already understands that. But what about you guys, Miguel, Mauro? What does it mean to you to be to have this opportunity to get involved on a European level and share data? Does it change your operations? Miguel?
Well, as I explained in this case, yeah, I mean, it could be a game changer to go to the market if you really found data that is really trustable and is with a single access and I can go from my local market to another market. So from our point of view, that is just okay selling our services. So from our point of view, and sharing the information we have about this our projects, it's really, having open data, trustable data in a fashionable way in which we can access for a single point. It's a game changer, basically.
Do you think it increases your market potential? I mean, the
Yeah.
bottom line, will it change how much money you have in the bank at the end of the year?
Sure. I mean, I have examples that are not that concrete as the previous ones. For example, when we do consultancy, when we do business intelligence, we rely a lot on open data from, for example, I don't know, Comtrade or organizations that are multilateral and things like that gives you information from the markets in real time, and this is a value that, I mean, we have to pay for the data, property data. We cannot do this kind of work in an agile form, let's say. So to really check if a business is interesting for us, we need open data at some point and trustable and reliable data in real time, basically.
Perfect. So, Mauro, you've seen all these initiatives. You've heard about groups like GAIA-X. You've seen the commission here over the last couple of days talking about the digital agenda. You've seen a lot of legislation about data sharing and open data. And what does it mean to you? What does it mean to a company like yours?
Well, just imagine that 2 years ago, the 50% of our R&D on AI is what about to have a data contract with data, agreement with data, and just to contact a lot of companies to buy this data, because it's too expensive to go to the market just to create internally. And just to create this internally and respect all the times and all the regulations. So just talk with the reality like GAIA-X is just a way to say, okay, there is the people, there is the government, and there is the data, and just there is a one-to-one direct to say, okay, I can put in contact with them, and just to ask to have the providers to collect this data, ultimately manage this data, and also the notification, the feedback. If this data is changed, if something's changed inside the data or inside the regulation, inside the company, or inside the countries where this data were created, or the single people the data was created. So it's a huge impact.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree. Tania, you're on the other hand, on the other side of the question, you're providing services already to companies like Mauro's and Miguel's. Why can't you just do it alone? Why do you think that you want to be involved in a wider pan-European federation of groups like yours? What kind of impact does that have for you?
First of all, we are not doing it alone. Already we are collaborating with companies that are in Greece or in Europe with startups, and we're already trying to combine different kind of services in order to create new, to get on that, to help SMEs get on that train, that this train is moving really fast and nobody can be alone on that. And I think it's really important that if we do it that time, we were doing that in an ad hoc manner, but joining this federation gives us a framework for doing things and gives us support on how to organize everything from a concept to how to use the components, how to incorporate new things, and even how, from a business perspective, how to go into, to help businesses go to the market with this new repositioning that they are doing. And this is really important. And it's also important in order to exchange best practices. This is something that we cannot do it alone. We need to get to know what people are doing in respective fields, in other countries, in other situations, in experiments that are replicated. And it's also important to find to help SMEs find funding opportunities in order to run some proof of concepts, some experiments, because this this is something really new. You know, they want to change their processes. They want to change the way they approach the market. They want to incorporate new things, and they are reluctant. They don't have enough capital in order to do that. And through the federations, through the support of the European Commission, and with the help of the support of the digital innovation hubs, SMEs can benefit from all this, and can experiment and do some proof of concepts and take the next step.
Mm-hmm. So Mauro and Miguel, are you guys aware of the fact that there are several initiatives that will bringing together digital innovation hubs? And so what maybe a couple years ago was a small amount of services, now through initiatives like EU Hubs for Data has an incredible wealth of services and data sets available. Is that something that is attractive to you? Do you know about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's attractive just to acquire and just to use this dataset, but also to be able to train other public administration, other companies to say, you have the same data, you can share in the same way. So it is also to reverse the problem of I have data and just something to collect this data and just to wrap, to consider and transform. And see that some companies that start, okay, there is someone else that is sharing the same data. I can directly use their format. So they can standardize. So this is another positive aspect to have this kind of data centralized.
Sure.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, we ourselves, we know about this project. We didn't have the time to really get involved deeply, but yeah, we're checking because, as I said before, it opened new markets and definitely it's a game changer. So for us, for SME.
Yeah, it's actually very easy to get involved. The first thing that you might want to do is just go to the EU Hubs for Data.eu website and look at the catalog. There are tons and tons of services from DIHs across all of Europe, and there's tons and tons of data. You know, you might find that it's a reason in itself is just to access the data that's out there and publicly available. Unfortunately, I'm getting pinged that this session needs to be concluded, and I guess we're Daniel, you are going to come in and tell us a little bit more about the results we've had today. But before we go, I'd really like to thank Mauro, Miguel, and Dania for coming in and sharing their thoughts and their time with us. So thank you very much from our side. Daniel, over to you.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the panelists in the three sections we had in this session. I just go very quickly to some conclusions about what we were talking today and the importance of federation of data platforms and data strategies or initiatives in Europe. I have prepared some slides, but very quickly, conclusions regarding the policy and strategy, the first section of this session. Data spaces are key for the development of the European economy and the data economy, but it's a key element, the data economy in the whole European economy. We need to separate on one side data spaces and on the other side technical infrastructures and building blocks. In this technical part, we have some building blocks already created, but others will be created in the future, and we need to coordinate of this creation of building blocks and technologies. This is in the technical part. In the data spaces or strategic part, we need also to coordinate all the stakeholders around data spaces, and there are some initiatives that are going in this way, like EU Hubs for Data, as you mentioned along the session. Also important to work on data monetization and data trading. And we have different funding opportunities in digital program and also Europe, Horizon Europe program to fund these data spaces and also to coordinate all of them. In the time till we have this digital CSAs, the data spaces support center, for example, running, we have EU has for Data project and BDBA that are working for creating this Federation of Data-Driven Innovation Hubs. And that goes beyond the project. I mean, we have, or EU has for Data has planned the creation of this federation to be sustainable beyond the project and contribute to the coordination of all the stakeholders and the creation of the glue among them, as Anna said. Going to the technical part, we have the Gaia X, Fireware, IDSA, and EOSC, which are providing both, all of them, reference models, standards, building blocks for creating these data spaces, and also look for the digital and data sovereignty and also strategic autonomy, as Pierre said. In this session, we saw that interoperability is a key element. Then we need self-descriptions, glossaries, vocabularies. Not reinventing the wheel is also crucial. And then we need to learn from experience and also create, use and create, if possible, European standards that can make Europe the leader in this area of ethicals and data spaces. We need trust between parties. Is a key element to provide to create these data spaces and allow data sharing among parties. Open source is a good contributor to this trust, and standards again as well is an important part that we need to accelerate in Europe. Also, governance of data for research is needed because there is a lot of data coming from research, and that can contribute to very important impact, like, for example, health research and other areas. And again, talking about EU has for Data is working and following and some of those standards and technologies, creating this federation, as I said before, providing a global catalog that is deployed at local level through the DIHs. In that session, there were two main areas of discussion, main challenges, and the differentiation between centralized and decentralized approach. Regarding main challenges, identity to provide trust, contract management, and license negotiation. Try to work or to build on a standard and tools that everybody can know and also can use in order to be all coordinated. Not reinventing the wheel. Also cover all the fronts in a sufficient way, and not only one as a key element. For example, self-descriptions, identity, all are important things for getting success. Interoperation between technologies and standards, again against having one standard winning. We had some discussions there regarding boost all the standards and make them make some connectors to all the standards of technology, or having one standard that is winning and is creating de facto a standard. And also digital twins as a good contribution to data spaces. And talking to centralized against decentralized architectures, we were talking about that it can be more easier to decentralize the infrastructure, but when coming to the governance, legal issues, regulations, agreements, maybe this need to be agreed between parties, and then it is not a full decentralized architecture where we will have at the end. And so we will have some brokering, some central elements that can assure that those common regulations and so on. And going to the impact, we saw 3 different examples from companies and also the IHs talking about the impact of federation of data platforms and also talking about EU has for data. It was clear that EU has for data and federations can provide opportunities for SMEs to access a global catalog of services and also data sources that can be tested and standardized. The Federation of DIHs are providing a very capillary network that can deploy in the catalog at local level. We are thinking global, but acting local. DIHs are also very active elements in their environments at local and regional ecosystem, but also with a lot of connection to other initiatives at European level, so they can act as bridges between ecosystems to provide and to increase the impact and to connect SMEs, local SMEs with SMEs in other countries and other regions. Citizens are also benefited from this federation, not only companies or organizations. And finally, the federation or this kind of federation, long-term federations, provides sustainability to initiatives that can run out of resources and then can go to this federation to continue working and get more opportunities to go to the market. So this is the last point. So I would like to thank all the speakers, all the projects that were presented here, and that's all from our side. Thank you very much, and continue listening to the other sections.